At just 31, James Dean's closest friends whispered about a dangerous secret. They claimed the rebel icon had slept with a powerful studio mogul in exchange for roles, a bargain that left scars deeper than any car crash. The man America saw as untouchable was caught in a web of desire, manipulation, and ambition. Could Hollywood's brightest star have been forced to pay the highest price for fame? The truth begins not in the spotlight, but in the quiet heartbreak of his early years. James Byron Dean was born on the 8th of February, 1931, in the small town of Marion, Indiana. His father, Winton, was a dental technician. His mother, Mildred, adored her son, nurturing his imagination with art, music, and stories. For young James, she was the center of the universe. But tragedy struck early. When he was just 9, Mildred died of cancer, leaving him shattered. Winton, overwhelmed, sent his son to live with his aunt and uncle on a farm in Fairmount. The flat fields of Indiana shaped him. Days were filled with barn chores, basketball games, and quiet afternoons sketching or playing the violin. Yet behind those simple scenes lingered loneliness. Dean missed his mother's warmth, and his father remained distant, rarely visiting. It was in this void that he learned to create his own world, one fueled by daydreams, rebellion, and a longing to belong. The 1,930 seconds and 1,940 seconds were a paradox. Swing music floated from radios, teenagers jitterbugged at school dances, and fashion was neat and proper. Yet strict social codes ruled the era. Conformity was prized. For young men, masculinity meant stoicism, church on Sundays, and marrying early. But hidden beneath this polished surface was a world unspoken. Homosexuality was considered a sin, even a crime. Whispers could ruin reputations, careers, and families. James grew up in this climate of silence, carrying questions about himself that he dared not ask aloud. He found solace in performing, mimicking voices, clowning for classmates, and watching movies in town theaters. On screen, stars like Humphrey Bogart and Tyrone Power embodied the toughness he craved, while actresses like Elizabeth Taylor and Bette Davis carried a magnetism that fascinated him. He wanted their world, the flicker of the projector, the velvet seats, the glamour so far removed from Fairmount's cornfields. High school gave him a chance to shine. He acted in school plays, drove motorcycles recklessly down quiet country roads, and sketched his way through classes he didn't care about. Teachers saw a restless spirit, someone searching for an outlet larger than a small town could provide. After graduation, he followed his father to California, enrolling at UCLA. Los Angeles in the late 1,940 seconds was booming drive-ins, palm trees, jazz clubs pulsing with energy. For Dean, it was both intoxicating and overwhelming. Yet in that city of stars, he remained the boy from Indiana, carrying grief and a hunger to be seen. His journey toward Hollywood was beginning, and the stage was set for both triumph and tragedy. Los Angeles in the early 1,950 seconds was a city buzzing with opportunity, but it was also a fortress controlled by powerful studios. James Dean arrived with little more than determination, his motorcycle, and a dream. He enrolled at UCLA, first studying law before shifting to theater. Acting, he discovered, was the only place he felt alive, where pain could be transformed into something beautiful. Dean's natural talent caught the attention of mentors. One of them, actor James Whitmore, encouraged him to study seriously. Dean auditioned for television parts and small stage roles, often facing rejection for being too intense, too different from the polished young men studios preferred. But those who looked closer saw something raw and magnetic. His first screen appearances were blink and you miss it roles. A soldier in Fixed Bayonets, 1,951. A sailor in Sailor Beware, alongside Jerry Lewis, and a small part in Has Anybody Seen My Gal? These fragments hinted at possibility, but offered no breakthrough. To survive, he worked odd jobs, parking cars, serving food, and even working as a stunt tester for CBS. Everything changed when he moved to New York in 1951. There, he immersed himself in the actor's studio, under Lee Strasberg, mastering the method. The city suited him. smoky cafes in Greenwich Village, nights spent reading poetry aloud, rehearsals that stretched until dawn. Dean lived on little, but he carried an intensity that drew people in. Fellow students like Paul Newman and Geraldine Page recognized him as a force unlike anyone else. Television gave him a new platform. He began landing live drama performances on shows like Studio One and Kraft Television Theater. Each performance revealed his volatility, his vulnerability, his unpredictability. Audiences began to notice. So did Hollywood. In 1954, director Elia Kazan cast him in East of Eden. Dean played Cal Trask, a conflicted young man desperate for his father's love. It was the perfect role, mirroring his own yearning. On set, his erratic methods, sudden outbursts, brooding silences frustrated some. But when the camera rolled, he was electric. The film's release in 1955 made him an overnight sensation. Suddenly, James Dean was the face of a new America. He embodied rebellion, vulnerability, and raw masculinity all at once. Teenagers saw themselves in his restless spirit, while adults saw a dangerous challenge to tradition. He followed East of Eden with Rebel Without a Cause, cementing his status as the icon of youthful defiance. His final completed film, Giant, placed him alongside Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson, proving he could stand with Hollywood's elite. But fame came with a price. The studio system wanted him polished, controlled, marketed as a heterosexual heartthrob. Yet behind the posters and fan hysteria, Dean carried secrets, ones that could never be spoken aloud in that era. His rise to stardom had given him everything he dreamed of. But it also placed him in a cage, forcing him to live a double life. Behind the leather jacket, the cigarette, and the moody stare, James Dean lived a life of dangerous secrecy. Hollywood of the 1,950 seconds was not forgiving. The Hays Code dictated morality, and gossip magazines could destroy a career overnight. For stars like Dean, the only way to survive was to hide. Yet, love and desire could not be silenced. In New York, while studying at the Actors Studio, Dean found comfort with fellow actor William Bast. Bast was not only a roommate but also, by most accounts, Dean's first serious partner. Their bond went deeper than friendship. They shared tiny apartments, traded dreams, and stayed up late writing scripts and poetry. In later years, Bast carefully described their closeness, hinting at intimacy, but cautious not to shatter the legend. For Dean, this was a relationship that provided safety in a world that condemned him. Another figure loomed large: Rogers Brackett, a successful radio director more than 20 years older than Dean. They met when Dean was still struggling, and Brackett reportedly opened doors for him in exchange for companionship. Whispers suggested their connection was both professional and personal, a mixture of mentorship and desire. For Dean, the relationship was complicated, security wrapped in secrecy. As his fame grew, Dean's encounters shifted to Hollywood's hidden parties. In lavish Beverly Hills homes, away from reporters, he mingled with men who understood the cost of exposure. Rumors linked him to leading actors like Marlon Brando, whose dominance both fascinated and frightened him. Biographers note Dean once confessed a twisted attraction to Brando, even chasing a sadomasochistic thrill in their interactions. With Paul Newman, fellow Actors Studio alum, there were whispers of late-night conversations that blurred into intimacy. Other liaisons flickered briefly. A CBS director, a young writer, an extra on a film set. Dean moved in a coded world where glances carried meaning, and stolen hours in shadowed rooms provided fleeting freedom. The risk was constant. Being discovered could end his career before it truly began. Publicly, the studio paired him with women. Natalie Wood was painted as a love interest during Rebel Without a Cause, while Italian actress Pier Angeli was marketed as his great romance. Behind the flashbulbs, Dean longed for her but was also tormented. When Pier's mother forbade their union, reportedly because Dean was not Catholic and perhaps because whispers about his private life had reached her, she married another man. Dean sat across the street from the ceremony on his motorcycle, shattered. These relationships, secret or staged, defined him. They show a man caught between desire and survival, pulled between authentic love and the image Hollywood demanded. His secrets were not just personal. They were the fragile foundation on which his stardom rested. The closer he came to exposure, the heavier the cost became. By 1955, James Dean was the most electrifying young actor in America. Yet the brighter his star burned, the closer he came to exposure. Hollywood was a cruel guardian of its myths. Studios dictated who a star dated, what they wore, even how they walked. Morality clauses were written into contracts, and gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper thrived on secrets. Dean's intensity on screen made him irresistible to fans, but off-screen, whispers grew louder. His friendships with William Bast and Rogers Brackett were noted by insiders. Rumors of his fascination with Marlon Brando and Paul Newman floated through private circles. Studio executives grew nervous. A scandal could ruin their investment. So, they doubled down. Publicity teams staged photographs of Dean with young women, carefully planting stories in magazines. Natalie Wood, Ursula Andress, and Pierre Angeli were all names attached to him, creating the illusion of a heartthrob in demand. But Dean resisted control. He skipped studio parties, defied handlers, and spoke bluntly to the press. Once, when asked about his sexuality, he reportedly said he refused to go through life with one hand tied behind his back. It was a bold remark, and though few understood its meaning, those close to him did. Behind the image, the pressure mounted. Gossip columns hinted at odd habits and strange companions. Studio bosses warned him to keep quiet. Some directors feared he would implode. Dean turned increasingly to racing, speeding his Porsche through desert highways, chasing freedom where cameras could not follow. Friends recalled his recklessness growing with each new role, as though he sensed his time was short. The most painful blow came with Pierre Angeli's marriage. For Dean, who had once envisioned a future with her, it was not only heartbreak but also confirmation that his private self could never fully exist in public. To her family, and to society, he was too dangerous, too wild, too ambiguous, too unfit. He was left watching from the shadows, a rebel even in love. By the fall of 1955, Dean was balancing superstardom with unbearable isolation. He was the face of youthful rebellion, yet his true battles were fought alone, behind locked doors, in whispers and secret rendezvous. The crisis was not only the threat of scandal but the weight of living as two men at once, one for the world, one for himself. James Dean never lived to see later years in the way most stars did. On the 30th of September 1955, at just 24, he died in a car crash near Cholame, California. His Porsche collided on a highway intersection, and the boy from Indiana became a legend in an instant. 3 films, and he was gone. Yet his image never faded. What if he had lived? Friends believed he might have turned to stage work, perhaps writing or directing. William Bast imagined him as a restless creator, unwilling to stay in Hollywood's cage. Biographers speculate Dean might have found freedom in Europe, where actors like Dirk Bogarde and Jean Marais navigated careers with more privacy. Others believe he would have remained a rebel, defying studios, challenging stereotypes, maybe even daring to live more openly as times changed. In the decades after his death, society shifted. The Hays Code lost its grip. The 1,960 seconds cracked open conversations about rebellion, sexuality, and authenticity. By the 1,970 seconds, the closet was no longer the only option. Looking back, Dean feels like a figure born too soon. He carried truths that the world wasn't ready to hear. Even in silence, his legacy speaks. Fans still visit his grave in Fairmount, leaving flowers, cigarettes, or notes scrawled with love. His performances remain alive, trembling with vulnerability and rage. Each scene feels like a glimpse into his inner struggle, a young man begging to be understood. In a way, he has become more than an actor. He is a mirror of every person forced to hide, every dreamer who felt too different, every rebel who dared to want more. As the decades passed, stories of his secret relationships emerged in memoirs and biographies. They did not tarnish him. Instead, they deepened the myth. They revealed James Dean not only as a star, but as a human being who longed for connection. Today, He stands as both Hollywood icon and queer symbol, a reminder that truth, no matter how long it's hidden, always finds its way to the surface. James Dean's story is not just about fame or tragedy. It is about the cost of silence, the burden of secrets, and the courage of a young man who carried more than any 24-year-old should. He gave the world only 3 films, yet within them, he left a map of his soul, restless, fragile, yearning to be loved. The rumors of sleeping with a studio mogul, the coded romances, the whispered confessions, all of it reminds us that behind every legend is a human being navigating impossible choices. Dean's life was cut short, but his impact stretched across generations. His vulnerability opened doors for actors who came after him. His rebellion gave voice to those who felt trapped. His silence spoke louder than any headline. Even now, when we watch him stare into the camera, eyes full of both defiance and sorrow, we recognize something eternal: the need to be seen for who we really are. That is James Dean's gift and his warning. Fame may shine, but authenticity is what endures. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe James Dean would have come out if he had lived longer? And which of his films still lingers with you? Subscribe for more untold stories of old Hollywood where glamour and secrecy collided, and the truth still waits to be uncovered.